The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local journalism today at chly.ca/donate. Local news doesn't survive without local support.
Welcome to a Monday edition of Midcoast Morning. I'm Jesse Woodward. When you think of invasive species on the West Coast, you might think of Scotch-Broom or English ivy or European wall lizards. The Gabriola Island Shorekeepers Association is thinking of a different invasive species, the European green crab. They're hosting a talk Tuesday evening with Christine Spice about the crab and preventing their spread. Today on the program, we speak with Isobel Pearsall, a volunteer of the organization, about this invasive species and also about what the association is doing more broadly in the community. We also speak with Tom Therriault from Fisheries and Oceans Canada for further information about the crab, and Nick Wong from the Invasive Species Council of BC about how we can prevent their spread. Welcome to Midcoast Morning. Please introduce yourself and how are you involved in the Gabriola Island Shorekeepers Association?
For sure. I am a biologist. I live on Gabriola Island. I've been here since 2019 full-time, 2016 part-time. And when I first moved here, I was working as the director of marine science at the Pacific Salmon Foundation. And so I was particularly interested in joining the Gabriola Island Shorekeepers, who are a group of volunteers here on the island. There's about 40 members, and we try to have monthly meetings. And it's a bunch of folks that, really are concerned about the shoreline and the estuaries and all the beautiful bays and beaches around Gabriola and keeping those healthy. And
can you tell me a little bit more about the association? When was it founded and what does it do beyond what you've already mentioned?
Sure. I don't know if I know exactly when it was founded. It was before my time and when I joined, but it was been going for quite a number of years, maybe under different names and different folks involved. But much of what they're doing, there's a whole bunch of different projects that folks are doing and involved in. They're looking at things like forage fish monitoring around the island. We're just trying to understand where sandlands or surf smelt might be living and laying their eggs so we can protect those areas. We do a lot of debris cleanup, either on the shorelines, and in the past we've also done work to get underwater boats taken out by partnering with other organizations. And then we host, the speaker series and try to bring in speakers externally. We're obviously really interested in working with shoreline property owners and just looking at how they can do things that are really better for the sort of shoreline and nearshore marine ecosystems. We also do a bunch of mapping work. A lot of that has occurred in the past to look at where eelgrass and kelp are. Those are super important habitats for juvenile salmon. So we want to make sure that those environments and habitats are existing and being kept safe. Yeah, load of stuff, tons of things.
So you mentioned that you work with some other groups. What are the organizations you collaborate with?
Well, we do. I'm not working for the Pacific Salmon Foundation now, but we do collaborate with them. We've had them come in and they've been involved in doing a lot of our forage fish mapping work and eelgrass mapping. So they do a lot of work there that is super helpful and using data that, are collected by folks here on the island. We've worked with Sea Change Marine Conservation Society. They're heavily involved with eelgrass conservation. So they've come and given talks here on the island, run training sessions. We've worked with the Dead Boat Disposal Society and John Rowe, who was instrumental in removing some, underwater, basically dead boats, but boats that had been abandoned and, were a risk to navigation and just really health because they were leaking things. Those are probably the main groups that we've been partnering with.
You're also running a speaker series with Christine Spice speaking about European green crabs, which are a threat to eelgrass, something you've mentioned a handful of times. Where is eelgrass found and what is its role in the ecosystem?
Sure. So, it's really, it has quite a large span where you can find it, but it's fringing. It would be that first vegetation as you move, into the intertidal zone. You can get eelgrass and it can actually, be growing sort of a little further down in subtidal waters, but It's a super important habitat for juvenile fish and many other creatures. And basically our small fish, Pacific salmon, they rear in these habitats. They're feeding from organisms that are growing on the eelgrass. They are protected, from things. They can hide in there. And so they're really important nursery grounds. And so, there is a huge concern about the invasive European green crab, which, they can come in and take over and build up really massive populations very quickly. And they will outcompete a lot of organisms. They'll feed on young fish and a bunch of other stuff. And so they totally change those ecosystems. And then because they're burrowing for food, they can really damage the eelgrass beds. And, I think at this point, as far as I know, we haven't seen green crabs on Gabriola, but we know that they're moving into the Strait of Georgia, and they have been found, in just the last few years around Salt Spring Island. So having folks here on Gabriola, really understanding what do they look like, what do they do, how can they actually let folks know and report these to DFO, allows potentially for something to be done, right in the early days before those populations have had a chance to really establish and create a lot of damage.
So there's still time for early mitigation of the crabs.
That's the hope, yeah. And so, in some places like Souk, they've got into really high numbers, and there are mass trapping operations that are pulling out, hundreds and hundreds of them, and you just don't want to get to that point where you just have so many. It's actually really difficult to do anything about it.
And so Chantel Spice is coming in to give a talk on the green crabs. Who else have you had come in to give talks this year?
Earlier this year, we had Jackie Hildering. That was sort of a joint talk with another group on the island called Growls. And she is a humpback whale researcher, so she came and to talk about her work with the Marine Education and Research Society. And that was really all about, the studies that she's done around humpbacks and many other creatures, just a huge fountain of knowledge. So that was very well attended by the community. People were super interested. And over the last couple of years, we've had a number of different talks. We try to do, if we can, 3 per year. And we've had folks in from Northwest Hydraulic Consultants, Current Environmental, talking about soft shores approaches. We had John Rowe that I spoke about earlier from the Dead Boat Disposal Society talking about, what to do when you see an abandoned boat and some of his work to get, a lot of these boats out of our nearshore areas. And then we had another DFO biologist, Jacqueline Cleary, came and talked about herring in the Strait of Georgia, and that was another really well-attended talk. And so a whole bunch. And I think they're generally really well attended. People on this island are keen to know and keen to learn. And so it's a great thing.
For this talk about green crabs with Christine Spice, when is it and where is it?
Oh, okay. The talk is free to the public, and we're holding it at the Gabriola Arts and Heritage Building, or the GAC Hall as it's commonly known. That's just really just up the hill from the ferry terminal. So even someone coming over from Nanaimo could just walk up the hill. And it's going to be on July 29th it'll start at 7 p.m., but we'll be opening up for folks to come in around 6:45 on Tuesday evening. Probably about an hour and a half. And we'll be showing, after her talk, a short video. We'll be showing a short video on green crab identification.
Out of curiosity, where do you see the Gabriola Island Shorekeepers Association succeeding in their work, and where are the struggles?
I think we feel that we're being successful when we can share knowledge and, bring in people that are knowledgeable and have the folks that are moving onto this island and living, particularly in those shoreline properties, kind of understanding how some really simple things that they can do can make a huge difference to the health of those environments. And I think, by having talks and showing videos and sort of having, sometimes demo, classes or small workshops, you get people out on the water and you get them to, hopefully just appreciate what we have here and what we're doing. So I think all of that is success for us. Challenges, I think, are, there's just a huge amount of energy on Gabriola, but it also means like huge numbers of different organizations. So just having, enough people to really be part of what we're doing, I think, and bringing in new people and younger people into our group, I think would be really good, because that brings a lot of energy and new ideas. And that would be, I think, something that would be very beneficial.
Finally, where can listeners learn more about what the association is doing and how can they get involved?
Sure. So we do have a Facebook page for the Gabriola Island Shorekeepers Association, which we call GISKA, GISKA. So people can look for that Facebook group, and we will post things there when we're having talks, and they can contact us through that. And we also do have a website, which is very simply just giska.ca. And there people can find contact numbers and learn a little bit more about what we are working on.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Okay. Well, thanks a bunch. Thanks for chatting with me.
Isobel Pearsall is a director with the Gabriola Islands Shorekeepers Association. More information about their work can be found at giska.ca.
Midcoast Morning is part of our nonprofit newsroom project, supported by listeners like you. Keep this program on the air by funding it today with a monthly sustaining donation at chly.ca/donate. We've got tote bags and shirts if you need an incentive.
To get into some of the more finer details about the crab, I spoke with Tom Therriault from Fisheries and Oceans Canada. Welcome to Midcoast Morning. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Tom Therriault. I'm a research scientist with Fisheries and Oceans Canada at the Pacific Biological Station here in Nanaimo.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the European green crab? What's their natural range and how did they get here?
Sure. So the European green crab, as the name suggests, is native to Europe. It was introduced to the east coast of North America about 200 years ago. And then about 30 to 40 years ago, it made its way to the west coast of North America, arriving in California in the late 1980s, likely associated with bait worms or oyster transfers. And then the larvae, once into the marine environment, spread up the coast, reaching British Columbia in the late 1990s, likely associated with the strong El Nino that year. And then they've continued to spread northwards, and they're all the way now up into southeast Alaska. So it includes Haida Gwaii and Prince Rupert area.
So how quickly are they spreading locally? They're established down in the Souk area?
Yes. So they've been established down in Souk for well over a decade. We know that movement into Souk was likely a hitchhiking event associated with human-mediated activities. They were very slow to spread out of Souk, largely because the predominant currents that would carry the larvae washed the larvae out Juan de Fuca and out to sea. But then back when we had the heat dome, heat wave events, we had green crab detected in the San Juan Islands. That was around 2016. And then that event likely allowed the continued spread of green crab around the Salish Sea. So it's a separate event, but it's also not happening extremely quickly because it takes time for the larvae to reach the different sites.
You mentioned the East Coast. How long have they been established there? What's been their approach for dealing with the crab?
So on the east coast of Canada, Nova Scotia, New England area, that's where they've been for more than 200 years. More recently, they were introduced to Newfoundland, likely via commercial shipping. And there they've been monitoring and working with local community groups, different levels of government to conduct trapping or removal efforts. And then here on the West Coast, likewise, they're fairly widespread now. And again, there's a number of First Nations, community groups that have undertaken some small-scale control programs, but also participating in our early detection network.
What's ultimately the risk of the invasive European green crab on our coast?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's three main impacts that the European green crab is having on our coast. The first is competition with our native shore crabs, Hemigrapsis, for example. We see the effects of predation. So they're voracious predators eating a wide variety of organisms. So this is a number of our shellfish species, clams, mussels, oysters, but also, again, smaller individuals of some of our commercial species like Dungeness crab. And then maybe one of the more important ones is their foraging behavior results in disturbance, disruption, damage to eelgrass meadows. And anybody living in BC knows how important those eelgrass meadows are for small salmon and a number of other species.
Can you maybe expand on eelgrass? It's been described to me as integral to the ecosystem.
Yeah, so eelgrass is one of those species that supports early life history stages of salmon. They use it for foraging. They use it for shelter. Same with Pacific herring and Dungeness crab and a number of other species in those eelgrass meadows. Of course, eelgrass is under stress from climate change and other anthropogenic activities. But importantly, the green crab, when they're foraging, they're digging for organisms in the sediment, so they're snipping the rhizomes, which creates patchy eelgrass. They're cleaning organisms off the blades, so they're snipping the blades for epibionts, and those are then floating through the system. So it just totally degrades the habitat that's required by our native species to survive and thrive.
How is the DFO dealing with new observations? How can listeners who might be on the shoreline or crabbing be able to identify the crab? Are they always green?
So great question. No, they're not always green. So the easiest way to distinguish a European green crab from all of our native species is that on either side of the eye, there's 5 distinct spines. So our native cancer crabs, Dungeness, for example, they have 10 spines, as do our red rock crabs. And then our native hairy shore crab or purple shore crab, the Hemigrapsis species, they only have 3 small spines. And so that's the easiest way, is the number of spines, to separate it from our native species. The colors range from green to yellowy to orangey red, depending on a number of factors. The other thing that you can note on a European green crab is the last leg is flattened somewhat, which aids them in swimming.
If somebody finds one of these crabs, what should they do?
So DFO has set up a reporting line, especially for the Strait of Georgia, Sailor Sea. And you can get those details from one of the AIS managers that maintain that program.
After speaking with Tom, I spoke with Nick Wong from the Invasive Species Council of BC about how the crab spreads.
So my name is Dr. Nick Wong. I'm the Science and Operations Manager with the Invasive Species Council of British Columbia. I'm a marine ecologist. I also studied crabs for my PhD, and love the ocean.
And so what is the council doing to mitigate things getting worse with the European green crab in BC?
So for us, our focus is mostly around education and outreach. We were fortunate to partner with Fisheries and Oceans Canada back in 2021 to create some online e-learning training on European green crabs. So Fisheries and Oceans coordinates all the volunteer community science trapping, which for monitoring green crab across the province. But before you can do that, you need what is called a Section 52 scientific license. And so through our e-learning center, there's 2 modules that you can do and then complete a short quiz. And after that, you've got your Section 52 license. So then you can go on and connect with the many local community groups taking part in this community science trapping work. And so that's the main focus, but we also do we take inquiries from the public and reports through our online form and emails on European green crab, and help confirm IDs and send those along to Fisheries and Oceans Canada as well.
What are the challenges for preventing their further spread?
Yeah, so unfortunately, preventing spread of marine invertebrates is pretty tough, largely to sort of crabs in particular, and this one, their physiology, they're pretty resilient creatures. Adults can survive out of water for days as long as they don't dry up too much. This crab has a really long planktonic free swimming larval stage, so they can float around in the currents for up to 90 days. And unfortunately, a lot of things that we like doing, boating, crabbing, fishing, can potentially unknowingly spread this species to new locations. So the really small microscopic larvae can survive in ballast tanks or in your live well on your boat. The larvae, small crabs, can cling onto your crab traps and gear, and they can accidentally be packaged up with shellfish and that type of stuff. So accidental transport is a real big challenge, I would say, for sure.
Finally, where can listeners learn more about what the association is doing, and how can they get involved?
Yeah, they can help the ISCBC firstly by keeping your eyes open for the species whenever you're out or near the water. They do have a key defining feature that no other crabs in BC waters will have, and that's these 5 distinct, so they call them marginal teeth or points or sort of spines on either side of the eye. You can't rely on color. Green, they can be green, they can be yellow, they can be brown, they can be gray. So that's not quite a defining feature. If you do happen to see a crab, even if it's, if you're not sure, you can report that to us through our website. You can email us. You can contact Fisheries and Oceans Canada as well. But again, I would look, if you're interested, do some Googling and find those community groups or the regional invasive species organizations in your area that could be doing the community science monitoring. If you're out recreating on the water, we always encourage people to clean, drain, and dry. So that's so you don't accidentally transport crabs, larvae, or the eggs. So you clean all the plants, animals, and mud from your boat or your gear. You dry all the water from your boat and your gear on land, and then you dry all the parts of your boat and gear completely. And so hopefully that should reduce the risk of spreading the crabs or their other life stages to new locations. And you can find out more about green crab, the process of clean, drain, dry, and how to report invasives like green crab on our website at bcinvasives.ca.
Nick Wong is with the Invasive Species Council of BC. Those not able to make it to the talk from the Gabriola Island Shorekeepers Association can find more information about how to identify invasive European green crabs from the Pacific Salmon Foundation and Coastal Restoration Society at marinescience.ca. You can learn more about the Gabriola Island Shorekeepers Association, their projects and events at giska.ca. And that's our show for today. Thanks for joining me. I'm Jesse Woodward, executive producer for Midcoast Morning. Joe Pugh is our regular host producer. Arby Fruit is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe. If you have a story you think we should cover, email us at news@chly.ca. Now you can find Midcoast Morning on even more podcast services like Spotify, YouTube, and others. Give us a positive review wherever you can find us. It really helps. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. Find them on Bandcamp. That's all for now for this edition of Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and generous listeners like you. Support our news, current affairs, and arts and cultural programming through our nonprofit newsroom project today by making a monthly sustaining donation at chly.ca/donate. Finally, this program gives thanks to the Snuneymuxw First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.